Herschel Walker produced an honorary badge.
You have a prop.
Yes.
That is not allowed, sir.
Yeah.
I ask you to put that prop away.
Well, it's not a prop. This is real.
These moments can have an impact, even if there aren't many of them. But tonight, there's another debate in a crucial Senate race. Again, a very tight contest between a moderate Democrat and a Trump-approved Republican. But in this state, there's an added layer because one of these candidates has had a major health scare on the trail. All of this has set the stage for the only Senate debate this year in Pennsylvania between Democrat John Fetterman and Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz. So let's take you to Philly this morning. ABC's Will McDuffie is one of our campaign embeds who's been exclusively covering this race. Like, this is what he does. You might have seen him on Hulu's Power Trip with George Stephanopoulos, where we see just how much hustle you have to do. Will, I see you in the apartment you had to rent for your time there. How long have you been in Philly now?
Almost 3 months, since the beginning of August.
And not enough time to decorate, I see.
Yeah.
Can you just walk me through this race and what has made it so unique so far?
Yeah, it's unique because one candidate is a celebrity, Dr. Oz, and the other candidate looks nothing like a politician, John Fetterman, who was the mayor of a small steel town outside of Pittsburgh and has served as the state's lieutenant governor.
If you believe that a human being should toil for $7.25 an hour, vote for the other person.
He campaigns in hoodies and shorts, nothing like you would see a senator wear on the Senate floor. He was pulling away in his primary, getting set to take on possibly Dr. Oz in the general election. And then a few days before primary day, he had a stroke.
It was on Friday. I just wasn't feeling very well. So I decided, you know what, I need to get checked out. So I went to the hospital.
I made you get checked out. Because I was right, as always.
As he tells it, he was on his way to a campaign event in Lancaster County and started feeling bad. And his wife, who was in the car with him, said, "You're having a stroke. We need to get you help."
Of course, there's nothing John likes more than being on the campaign trail. And the time off has been hard on him.
So the first couple months of the general election, Fetterman was recovering from this stroke and was not doing any public events. He had a really strong online presence. His campaign soon became known for its memes and its witty jabs at Dr. Oz for being an outsider and a carpetbagger from New Jersey, but he himself wasn't actually visible on the trail.
Inflation is hurting everyone. Gas prices, food prices, retirement savings diminished. John Fetterman would raise everyone's taxes, making inflation that much worse.
For his part, Oz has tried to make this race about the core issues that he thinks voters care about. Crime and inflation are the main things he discusses on the trail now.
Most of my criticisms of John Fetterman are designed to educate voters. He should come out and defend himself.
And starting in August, Fetterman returned to the trail and his campaign sort of gingerly rolled him out.
Let's get some stuff done for America.
So that's all culminating tonight in what is the only debate that's going to happen between these two candidates. And it's highly anticipated because Fetterman, while there are still some visible signs of his stroke in the way he speaks, and he has to use some aides to help him understand what's being spoken to him, Oz is a polished speaker.
Are you willing to fight China? Yeah. Will you fight for our kids in our schools? Yeah. Are you going to fight back to keep our borders clean?
And he's used to being in front of cameras because he was for years on TV.
But wait, Will, so just so I'm clear, is he okay? Because there are medical issues where you can, obviously continue on. There are lots of people with disabilities who do their jobs every day, but then there are also disabilities that would affect you from being able to do your job in the same way as you had envisioned. Which one is this for John Fetterman?
It's tricky because senators are very visible, and some of Fetterman's symptoms have been very visible.
What is wrong with demanding for an easy, safe kind of their income, a path to a safe place for them to win, to work?
But there's no indication that there's anything cognitively wrong with him. And that's something that I think people were conflating early on when he returned to the trail, because there were a lot of times when he first came back that he was speaking choppily and in a way that might make you concerned. But his primary care doctor released a note just last week saying that cognitively, he's fine.
But patients can also have language issues with stroke where they're having a difficulty with integrating the information that they're receiving, where it's not really an issue with hearing, but rather an issue with the language processing.
And neurologists that we've spoke to who have not treated Fetterman, but have treated a lot of stroke survivors, say that just because you might have trouble speaking as you recover doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you cognitively.
Has this become an issue between Fetterman and Oz at all? Like, has this been a talking point at all from Mehmet Oz's campaign?
In the days and weeks after the stroke, Oz did not touch Fetterman's health in a negative way. He didn't make it a campaign issue. If anything, he was supportive as someone who himself, he's a doctor.
I have tremendous empathy for what John Fetterman is going through. It's an area that I specialize in medicine. All these issues are challenges, especially if you're in the political arena, which is physically demanding.
He does say he wishes Fetterman would be more transparent about what's going on. But Oz sort of lets other Republicans and even some people on his campaign kind of get in the mud with that issue and attack Fetterman for his health.
Dr. Oz's camp put out a statement saying recently if Fetterman had eaten a vegetable in his life, maybe he wouldn't have had a major stroke.
And when Oz was asked if he agreed with what his staffer said, he kind of tried to distance himself from it and said, well, my campaign says what they say. I speak for myself. And that itself, true criticism.
I hope that you didn't have a doctor in your life making fun of it, laughing at you, telling you that you're not able to do your job.
There have been other Republicans like Rick Santorum who've appeared on outlets and said Fetterman can't speak. He shouldn't be able to serve in the Senate.
As a senator, you're not a governor. You're not someone who's managing a bureaucracy or an executive branch. Your job is to talk and vote.
It's been picked up by people other than Oz. Oz has sort of tried to keep his nose clean.
Well, and so what does that all mean for tonight in this very crucial race? Like, what are you looking for?
There are a couple things. One is, how are people who haven't been tuned into this race going to handle seeing Fetterman on stage using closed captioning and maybe having trouble speaking? That's going to be one thing to focus on. The other is the issues.
Because abortion is on the ballot in Pennsylvania and in this nation.
We don't want folks voting before they've actually heard John Fetterman defend his far-left radical ideas.
So much of the oxygen in this race has been taken up by accusations of Oz being an outsider and on the focus on Fetterman's health. And some of the issues that actually matter to voters day to day have been a little bit lost.
Fascinating moment here. We'll see what happens tonight. Will McDuffie, there on the trail for the duration. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Next up on Start Here, he once said no one man should have all that power, so why is Kanye West being quoted by white supremacists? We're back in a bit.
With so much on the line, the stakes couldn't be higher. ABC News Election Night. Who will control Congress? What will it mean for his agenda and deciding our next president? What will it mean for you? ABC News with breaking reports from all across the country. It all comes down to this. Your voice, your vote. Streaming all day and election night starting at 7 Eastern as the polls close on ABC News Live. After an extraordinary news-making year, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings. From America's #1 news comes the all-new ABC News app. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
There's no doubt that Kanye West is a hip-hop icon. His first album, College Dropout, was widely considered not just one of the greatest debuts of all time, but one of the finest albums, period. In recent years, though, lots of people have hung on his every word, his every tweet, to really just see what outrageous thing Ye would say next.
Read the whole tweet.
What do you want to know, the whole tweet?
I want you to read it out loud, sir.
I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people.
This has divided a lot of people, because on one hand, he's obviously a newsworthy figure. He's got broad reach in music, fashion. He's now the owner of a social media company. He ran for president. But on the other hand, this is a guy who is on record describing severe mental health challenges. He's openly said he's bipolar, that he's been institutionalized, and has made some of these statements while claiming he's off his medication. So at what point does seeking out his views and airing them just become exploiting someone for clicks? But recently, it's been impossible just to ignore his words because they've been linked to anti-Semitic hate speech that has found its way offline and onto the streets of Los Angeles. Let's go to ABC's chief national correspondent, Matt Gutman, who's based in L.A. Matt, can you just describe what's been happening there the last several days?
There has been a lot of talk about Kanye, and then on Saturday, there was a banner, a series of them actually, Brad, hanging over the 405 freeway, including one that said Kanye was right about the Jews. The people who were hanging it stood above it, flagging the Nazi salute, the Heil Hitler salute.
The anti-Semitic banner on the 405 coupled with the Nazi Hail Hitler salute just sent a chill down my spine.
And then almost simultaneously, we don't know if it's from the same people, a bunch of leaflets were distributed in Los Angeles and in Beverly Hills, left on people's driveways, basically blaming the Jews for COVID, for certain wars, for being greedy. In many ways, just echoing what Kanye West has been saying about the Jews.
I don't want it to be settled. I don't want to be forgiven by Jewish people until we get to what the problem really is.
The CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, said that Kanye has now become the most well-known, widely heard, brazen anti-Semite on the planet. He's got, 31 million followers on social media, over 18 million on Instagram alone. That's more than the number of Jews in the world. So these anti-Semitic comments that he has made are being amplified, and now they're starting to gain traction.
Well, and so the concern here, of course, is that the words of one person end up being echoed by a much larger group of people, like a movement of hate speech. Then, of course, there's the potential step to real-world violence, like in the street. Is that something that law enforcement there is actually concerned about?
It is a concern, and specifically because there has been a lot of upset over things like the economy, over COVID, and when you blame the Jews for things like that, then people can start to take action.
This is a direct consequence of hate speech that's been carried out on a very, very large national stage.
So right now, the Greater LA Jewish Federation, which monitors these kinds of security incidents, the LAPD, and Beverly Hills Police, which are all investigating this and monitoring it, say, hey, listen, this is all protected by the First Amendment right at this point, right? This is all free speech. But we need to document this in case these people then take words into action.
Until now, we're talking about words. Let's just hope it stays there.
A person could take something that's hate speech and protected by the First Amendment and then go out and commit a crime. And at that point, their previous hate speech could be an aggravating factor in anything that they do. That's why they're monitoring it. They are just monitoring this as hate speech, but right now, nothing more.
Well, and so if these words and then the possibilities of violence are being linked back to the guy who said these things, Kanye West, what happens to him? Because he's not just famous, like he's also part of highly lucrative industries.
The consequences, have been significant depending on how you look at it. Gap, JP Morgan have dropped ties with him. CAA, which was his agent, they dropped him. And now there's a lot of pressure on Adidas, which runs his brand Yeezy, very expensive shoes where there's a massive profit margin, to drop him as well. Unclear what Adidas is going to do. They said on October 6th that they are going to review their relationship with Ye. It is now much later than that, 3 weeks later, and still no word.
The thing about it, me and Adidas, is like, I could literally say anti-Semitic and they can't drop me. I could say anti-Semitic things and Adidas can't drop me. Now what?
The mayor of Beverly Hills, who's a daughter of a Holocaust survivor, I asked her, what action can we take? And she said, we can't take any action because it's all protected by the First Amendment, but we can talk about it. And that's probably the best thing we can do, is just make sure that people know that this is not okay and that this kind of hate speech is meant to divide us. And we can't let that happen.
and I keep thinking to some of the people who have directly engaged with Kanye West, like Elon Musk is one of those fans. Like, he now owns Twitter, and he's expressed a desire to have more content from people like Kanye West, not less content. It makes you wonder what sort of long-term ramifications that could have. Matt Gutman in LA. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Brad.
I remember when I was in junior high, I really loved the idea of perhaps going to our local performing arts high school. Not just because I liked the arts, but because the kids there just seemed happy. They were being encouraged to pursue their talents, their dreams. Every day was about finding joy in school, which is perhaps why I was so horrified yesterday to hear about yet another school shooting in this country, this time at a performing arts high school in St. Louis, Missouri.
I was trying to run, and I couldn't run. Me and him made eye contact, and I'm glad I made it out because his gun got jammed.
My friend have all blood on her hand, and it was like she seen the shooter, and the shooter came to her and said, "You ready to die?" And just see her just screaming and crying, and it was just hurt me, and we all was just real scared.
2 students were killed, several more injured, and the gunman himself was also shot dead by police after an exchange of gunfire. We're still learning more details about that, but it was worth noting that all this came exactly 5 months after the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And if we're talking about how the events of one day can live with you forever, that doesn't just apply to the families of the victims or the students in the room. We've also seen lives upended because of incorrect information distributed by authorities.
Did they think they were going to get away with that?
You think they were intentionally trying to make you the scapegoat?
Yes. Yes.
Yesterday, ABC's own John Quinones put out the very first interview with a school staff member who was initially blamed for allowing the shooter to enter the building. John is with us now from Uvalde, Texas, where he's been contributing reporting as part of our Uvalde 365 project. John, I remember this school aide, police came out and said she took like a smoke break and that she propped open the door. Everyone blamed her. Then a few days later, it turned out she actually did close the door behind her. What did she tell you in this interview?
The information was totally wrong. If the authorities had just looked at the surveillance tape, security video, just 3 or 4 minutes into it, they would have seen that she came back in and closed the door. What do we see here?
You see me kick the rug and pull the door. The door shut.
You did not leave it open?
No.
The bottom line is, we reported what happened. Is that back door was propped open. It wasn't supposed to be propped open. It was supposed to be locked. And certainly the teacher that went back for her cell phone, it propped it open again. So that was an access point that the subject used.
This is the story of a staffer who worked taking care of students after school at Robb Elementary. She'd been on the job there for just a month. And now, she says, her name is Emilia Marin, and her life is in shambles. How often do you think about that day, May 24th?
Every day. Every day. It's on my mind all the time.
All because of this false accusation by one of the state's top law enforcement officers, Stephen McCraw.
11:28. The suspect vehicle crashes into the ditch. As previously described, the teacher runs to the room 132 to retrieve a phone, and that same teacher walks back to the exit door, and door remains propped open.
I'm on the phone with a 911 operator, and I'm telling her there was a crash behind Robb's school. They crashed into a ditch.
This is a woman who, before this all happened, was a dynamic woman who loved to work with kids, and now she's in therapy. She when she speaks, she has a tremor. She stutters a lot. She can't sleep at night. It has been just horrific what's happened to her over the course of the last 5 months.
Yeah, what happens after something like that, after getting called out so publicly? What are the next days and weeks like after that?
Yeah, I mean, the authorities did come out. DPS did issue a statement 2 or 3 days later saying, oops, we were wrong. The door was indeed closed by her. So we're sorry. We're sorry this happened. But by then, the damage had been done. After that, the victim's parents call you, and anyone try to console you?
No.
To apologize for that false report?
No.
The DPS?
No.
Law enforcement? The school administration?
Nobody.
They didn't name her initially, but in this small town of Uvalde, where I am right now, everyone knows everyone, right? It's a tiny town. So people knew, and she became a pariah in this community, people accusing her of having blood on her hands.
They heard just people make comments about people saying she needs to be fired for what she did, leaving the door open. But I know what I did.
It got to the point where she wants to move out of town now. She can't work, and she doesn't know if she'll ever be able to work with children.
And this makes me think that this kind of ties in with the broader issue. You mentioned how small Uvalde is, how everyone knows everyone, how there's sort of this need for accountability. And so I guess, have parents gotten the accountability that they're seeking?
Slowly, there has been some.
Parents appalled that Elizondo was hired by the very school district she was supposed to protect.
She was one of the first ones on scene, and she did nothing.
One police officer resigned from the DPS, but she then got hired by the Uvalde school district, and then she was forced to quit.
Elizondo was caught on tape saying afterwards that she would have gone in if her son had been inside.
No, if my son had been in there, no, I would not have been outside, I promise you that.
And then one police officer for DPS has been fired now, Juan Maldonado, and we expect more to happen. The superintendent of schools has retired after demands by the community, again, for months and months, that he step down.
I wish I could take that day back.
But you did nothing wrong.
No.
You wish you could take that day back for all the children and the teacher.
To have them all back.
As heartbreaking as it is Amy's personal tragedy, it's emblematic of a much larger story here. It represents the cascading levels of catastrophe that radiate from the unspeakable failures that happened at Robb Elementary, the botched police response, right? The lack of accountability among the powerful, and the effort to blame the little people like Amy Marin. And that part of the community will speak up, those who had children at the school. But I gotta tell you, you're right. Many folks are saying here, enough already. I was doing a live stand-up on the street the other day, and a car went by and they yelled at me, "Get out of our town." It's become very divided.
Yeah, and that dynamic, you got to think, becomes more pronounced because there's just such a heavy presence of law enforcement and families of law enforcement members in Uvalde. By the way, a report is coming due from the head of DPS about his investigation as to what went wrong. He happens to be the guy who originally made this false accusation about Amy Marin. John Quinones, who's been there so often, people obviously know you on the streets at this point, part of our Uvalde 365 project. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, thank you, Brad.
And one last thing. When British Prime Minister Liz Truss resigned last week, you could almost hear hands slapping foreheads across the Atlantic.
I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party.
Like, here we go again. The Conservative Party has to pick a new Prime Minister. Well, a lot has happened in the last 72 hours. First, Boris Johnson bowed out of the running. That's right, the former Prime Minister, who was pushed out in disgrace a couple months ago, was floated as a possible name here, but appeared not to have enough support to make a comeback. One of the other hopefuls to take the top job was Penny Mordaunt. Well, yesterday, she didn't get enough support either. That left one man.
I am prepared to give everything I have in service to our nation.
Rishi Sunak was recently Britain's Chancellor of the Exchequer, similar to the U.S. Treasury Secretary. He was in charge of financial policy. He's a moderate conservative and actually cut huge relief checks during the pandemic. Well, now it's official. He will be in charge of a country where big debts are coming due.
As returning officer in the leadership election, I can confirm that we have received one valid nomination. Rishi Sunak is therefore elected as leader of the Conservative Party.
Regardless of what Brits think of his politics, there is one undoubtedly groundbreaking thing about his victory here. Rishi Sunak is about to become the first prime minister in Britain's history who isn't white. His grandparents moved from modern-day India and Pakistan to what was then the British colony of Kenya. His parents then moved from Africa to the UK. He's a practicing Hindu, and to many, he is the personification of what a more inclusive Britain is capable of producing. And if Sunak's history kind of traces the country's past, he's also emblematic of the country's present, because the other thing to know about Rishi Sunak is he is incredibly, incredibly rich. He married into a family worth more than $800 million. At this point, he is reportedly richer than King Charles. And that is what Rishi Sunak is about to navigate here. How do you steer the UK back from the brink of financial ruin in a winter when people can't afford to keep themselves warm, when you could burn through 100-pound notes without a second thought? And keep in mind, he learned he would become prime minister yesterday during Diwali. Like, lots of Brits of Indian descent were in the streets. They were super excited. Then they would get asked by reporters, what do you think about the new guy? And then a lot of them were like, well, I support the other party. But this is very, very cool. Start here tomorrow. Hit that follow button if you haven't already. I'm Brad Milkey. See you tomorrow.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do?